right, and welcome back to another episode of Raoul's World of Synths. Continuing with the demonstration of the Doepfer A149-1 quanti-stored random voltages. The last two videos we did, we kind of discussed what the quantized random voltages section of this module does, and then we talked about what the lower section, the stored random voltages section, does. Talked about some of the differences as to what is output at the n+1 input versus the 2n, and just a little review in case you missed that one. It's actually voltages in octaves right here, and then voltages in semitones right here. This can become semi-important when we start the modulation demo here. And then below that, these two outputs are going to be outputting in quarter tones, so actually half of a semitone, if you want to think of it that way. And the top one was the equal distribution of voltages, of random voltages, across the 256 possible states of voltages coming out of here. And then the bottom one is the same thing, 256 states, but you can adjust the distribution. So if you focus it all the way in the clock or counterclockwise position, you have primarily low pitched random voltages with interspersed medium and high voltages. And then all the way in the clockwise position, you have the opposite. You have primarily high pitched voltages with interspersed medium and low pitched voltages. And the thing that we didn't demonstrate, though, because I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of separate the modulation demo, is modulation at the CVN input up here and the CVD input. So just a brief little snippet of what exactly this is. N, again, is the range of possible states at this output. The lower the state or mode that this setting is at, so 1 through 6, the fewer the number of possibilities coming out at either the top two outputs. And then the higher, you're all the way at the maximum, so you have the maximum amount of random voltages coming out of there. We're going to start out by talking about just the top section, or actually demonstrating it, I should say. And then we'll jump into the stored random voltages section. So let's just set up the basic patch. We have a clock coming in, gate signal, right over here. And I'm going to take that clock, and I'm going to actually feed it into my filter too. And then I'm going to also take that same clock and then feed it into the clock of the random control voltages right here. So that way it's spitting out notes every time a clock voltage is received here. And I'm going to bring my manual of N here, the range, I'm going to bring it down to maybe about 2 right there. And we're just going to hear what it sounds like just at value number 2 right there for N. I'm going to patch it into my VCO. So I'm going to just patch it into CV1. And I'm going to go out from my triangle wave into my low pass gate over here. So I'm going to patch in the audio in. Here we go. And that's a little slow, so I'm going to increase the frequency. Okay, so there we have the clock signal sending a random voltage out here every time that signal is received. And this is determining how many possibilities it has. So the further I go up, the wider the range of possibilities. So I'm bring it back to about 2. There we go. And now let's try modulating this. So I'm going to take a very, very slow LFO, And so I'm going to bring my frequency about to there. Yeah, so there you can see the kind of speed of it. It's at the top portion, it's going down. So I'm going to take the triangle wave, I'm going to patch it into CVN1. And we shouldn't hear anything because the attenuator is all the way down right there. So I'm just having my random notes spit out every time a clock signal goes there, and they're being determined by the range set at the setting here on man N dial. So I'm going to bring up the attenuator here, and you should hear a change start to happen. And then I can bring it up all the way. So it's modulating the value of N as set here, but as we said in the previous demo, the result of N is actually the sum of whatever is patched in here and what is set there. So that's why you start to hear it sort of go in the higher octaves, whereas when this is all the way down, you don't hear any of those very high pitches. But when I bring in the LFO right there, you start to hear some of the higher pitches. Okay. And not quite as exciting. The one right above it is the one that goes in octaves. So just so we hear what that sounds like, I'm going to bring this all the way down. I'm going to unpatch it. So there we just have oscillator, gate opening and closing. And now we're going to send it some pitches out the quantized random voltages here, but these are going to be in octaves. And again, they're determined by this right here. So let's actually bring it all the way down to value number 1 right there. So we should have just 2 distinct pitches coming out of there. Okay. Now we're going to bring in our LFO. And there you can hear that we're obviously going into some different pitches there. So, there you are. Modulation at the CVN input. And of course, you could vary it by using a different type of waveform, like we could take maybe instead of a triangle wave, we could try patching a sine wave in here. And it just gives us a slightly different flavor of random voltages coming out of there, or actually a different sum of the value of N, which then in turn gives us a different set of voltages coming out of the top N+1 output. Okay, so I think you understand that. So I'm going to actually unpatch my oscillator temporarily, so we can move on to the bottom section. I'm going to actually leave my clock plugged in right there, because I'm going to need it here in a second. So now we're going to move on down to the stored random voltages section. And we're going to do a little modulation down here as well. Just to review the dials here, because I didn't actually discuss them here at the beginning of this, but at the bottom, this is our distribution. So at the very bottom, we should have very low pitches, interspersed, middle and high pitches. And then the CVD here is going to send a CV to the distribution setting that you have here. And so the resulting output is going to be a sum of these two guys right here, the CVD in and the man D in. And this is going to just adjust how much of the control voltage going into here is actually going to be fed into there. So let's start by taking our clock from over here, because our multiple is duplicating the signal, and plug it into clock in down there. And we start getting some voltages coming out according to the clock speed over here. So I'm going to just start by plugging in the equal distribution here, even though these are not going to really affect it, just so we know what the equal probability distribution sounds like. So here we go. Patching that, and then I'm going to patch this into, oh, actually, let me patch my gate first. So my gate going from here into my low pass gate over here. There we go. So now it's triggering. And then I'm going to take my oscillator and patch it into my audio in right there. So that's the equal probability distribution. And as you can see, if I move this, it has no effect on that output. So if that truly is the case, then when we patch an LFO here, we're not really going to hear any change here. If we wanted to, we could verify that, and I'll go in and just try it just so we hear if there's any change whatsoever. And we still have fairly equally distributed random voltages. Again, these two at the bottom are going to be half of a semitone, so that's a quarter tone. Okay, so now that we hear that equal probability is going to stay pretty much equal probability the whole time, I'm going to unpatch that, and let's actually do the manual distribution one. And I'm going to start with the low pitches just because it's on this side. So I'm going to patch it. There we go. So now we have some low pitches going on here. I'm going to bring my attenuator all the way down. There we go. And then I'm going to take my control voltage signal, my LFO, triangle wave, and I'm going to patch out from that, and I'm going to feed it into the distribution CV input here. And we're not going to hear anything immediately, but I just want to get that in our ears. And again, what's coming out of here is one of 256 states every time clock signal is received from here. From here, going to the mult, going from the mult into the clock. So now we're going to bring in the CV input, which is going to control the distribution setting. So here we go. So you can hear it changing, and if you wanted to, you could watch as the modulation goes in different periods of the waveform. Now you could actually bring the frequency of this up. Like if I wanted to, I could bring it up. But the reason I'm choosing to do it this way is because it's actually a little slower and it's a little more subtle, so you can actually hear it. Because at a certain point, you know, if I bring this up all the way and this up all the way, it might not be as audible as you would expect it to be. At least that was my experience. Yes, I had a little bit of difficulties trying to find a demonstration that would be kind of effective for this, and I actually have someone to thank for that. From the Dofer Yahoo group, his name is Rich, and he gave me some very valuable information and a suggestion for this specific type of demo that would illustrate the voltage control parameter change that would occur at, actually he suggested the top section so that I could hear it, and so I just took that same example and did it here, and of course it worked. So that is distribution at the bottom setting being modulated by a triangle wave, and let's bring it back down to the low position. And then we can bring it to the mid position if we just want to hear what that sounds like. Slightly different flavor of random. And then we can go all the way to the high position if we wanted to, and hear yet another different type of random. At a certain point, it starts to get just in high pitches, so depending on what you're feeding this control voltage into, it may or may not be usable. This is just in an oscillator here. So, I mean, I could change the octave of the oscillator if I wanted to here. But the idea is the same. And I think you got that. Okay. So now that we have that, we've actually done a pretty good job of demonstrating the top section, quantized random voltages, and the bottom section, stored random voltages. So, as an added little bonus here, I'm going to actually patch something. If any of you watched the low-pass gate demo, the A101-2, you'll remember that I didn't actually demonstrate these two little guys down here, the gate 1, gate 2. Well, as I was doing this demo, I actually thought, hey, you know what? There's random gates that come out of this guy. I could use these to trigger the modes. So we're just going to hear what that sounds like. And in order to get that to happen, of course, there's no movement going on in my A149-2 because there's no clock signal going here. So I need a clock signal. Let me take another mult and go into my clock at the top. And now I'm getting a little movement over here. And now I can actually patch from one of these random gates. I suppose it doesn't matter which one. There is a rhyme and reason to this mathematically, but I'm not going to even attempt to go into that. So I'm going to take this random gate right here that's on and it's off. On when it's lit, off when it's not. And we're just going to hear what that sounds like going into here, changing the modes. So I'm going to plug it in. So you can definitely hear it's changing the mode. Whenever it triggers it, it's going into a different mode. It's going from a pitch sound to more like kind of a kick drum sound. If I change my frequency, loads and loads of fun. So there I actually have a couple of flavors of random if I want to get completely crazy over here. I could maybe take one of the random voltages from the top, and I really don't know what this is going to sound like, so if this doesn't sound very exciting, then I apologize for that. So let's go from there into here. And there I'm just actually triggering random voltages into the low-pass gate. So I'm actually getting two flavors there. But let me unpatch that here just for a second. I don't want to get sidetracked from my demonstration of the modes here. And you'll notice if I take this out, then I'm back to just the regular low-pass gated sound. There's also this gate 2 down here. I didn't 100% study in here, I just thought, well, this is an interesting way to kind of demonstrate this. So I'm going to patch it into gate 2 and see if I get any nice little results here. And you can hear the timbre changing a little bit via the gate. So not only do I have random voltages going from here into the pitch, but I also have random gates triggering the modes of my low-pass gate. So the breakout can be fairly useful. I mean, you don't necessarily have to trigger modes on this module here. The gates coming out from here can be used for any number of things. The reset on a sequencer, the reset on the LFO. Let's see what else. Reset of a envelope generator. We can actually demonstrate the reset of the LFO if we wanted to. So here we have my random gates going on. And just since I thought of this right now, I'm going to take one of these random gates, and I'm just going to feed it right back into the reset of my LFO. Now this might sound a little strange, but here we go. So there we go. And we have a lot of cross cables going on here, so hopefully that's easy enough for you to see. So there we go. We got a good little demonstration going on here of the quantized random voltages triggering the random gates, random gate then triggering the modes of the low pass gate over here, other gate being fed back into the LFO and triggering the reset of the LFO, so it goes back to the beginning of the LFO. So just another way you can vary your sound. The last thing I'm just going to kind of throw in before we move on to the next demo, which I'm not sure what it is yet, is since there's a CV input here that I haven't talked about, and in most of the other videos I have pretty much talked about almost everything on here. As far as like I have a video out there on the A110 standard VCO, you know, one on the low pass gate, A145. Multiples has made an appearance here and there. A147, so back to my point here, I was going to actually demonstrate this little guy for you, the CV input. This is one of my favorite things to modulate here, just in general, any module, I would have to say, next to my BBD, that is. So I'm going to take the LFO here, and I'm actually use it to modulate the frequency of this. So right now we have a pretty fixed frequency, you know, on, off, you know, so on. So here we go. We're going to modulate the speed of this LFO. Now I can adjust the CV level and bring it all the way down so I'm back to my normal frequency. Or I can tell it to go crazy. I can adjust the level of my modulation going on here. It's kind of like a ball rolling down the hill and then rolling back up a hill and then rolling back down the hill. Or however you want to think about it. Change my distribution a little bit. All kinds of blippy, little boopy kind of sounds. There's CV all the way to the max. So you can get some fairly interesting type sounds. And then it just kind of stops at the bottom. So what's happening is the speed of this LFO is actually controlling the speed of this LFO. Very, very useful CV input, in my opinion. And again, one of my favorite modules here. So I hope you enjoyed this demo. It was fun to make, and did enjoy going through the quantized stored random voltages. I've been holding off on this one for quite a while, but it is one of my favorite modules here, in tandem with its friend over here, the voltage controlled LFO. These guys are kind of inseparable. I actually wouldn't mind getting another one of these, just for fun. So, hope that you found this useful. and that this kind of maybe demystified what all the stuff on here was, because I know that this was a learning experience for me as well. So hope you guys join me for the next demo. As I said, I'm not really sure what I'm doing for the next time, but whatever it is, I'll try and make it as interesting as possible. And keep on patching out there, and we'll see you next time.